You always saying you get like slides to have like music at the beginning, like a Jeopardy theme or something, just something in the background as we wait for folks to come in. I'm bad like small talk conversationalist, especially with these webinar sort of things. So it'd be nice to have like instead of total silence, just some calming music across the board. Maybe I'll do that next year.
Because it looks like the waiting room has slowed down. So if you want to kick it
Sure.
off, and then we can get kind of every. I mean, if anybody else shows up, they'll come in.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Our final team science skills series of this year. Today, we're pleased to have Dr. Marissa Scheffler here presenting on multi-team systems. Marissa is a stellar scholar. She's from Clemson. She's been cited over, I think it's almost 4,000 times now, and she focuses on team dynamics in a lot of different respects. And her research has been funded by tons of institutions such as the Army, NASA. She won an NSF Career Grant, DHS, Prisma Health Upstate. And she works a lot of times with these large teams. And she'll talk to you about today about how coordinating those teams can be especially important, how to do that. And that note, I will turn it over to you, Marissa.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Let's see, let me get my slides up here. Let's see if it works. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, I think we should be all set there now. Okay,
Yep,
so
looks good.
make sure got the good. Okay, I've got the chat up over here. So yes, thank you, Chris, for the very kind introduction there. So, and thanks everyone for taking a little bit of your Friday afternoon here to talk about something that is near and dear to me, at least, which is multi-team systems. So as Chris mentioned, I've been studying and kind of trying to understand some of the challenges of working in these teams of teams, or what we call kind of multi-team systems. And so what I'm going to share a little bit today about with you all is going to be focusing on kind of what are some of the things that we've learned so far, what are some of the things that you may want to consider, and especially would love to hear any questions or things. You're happy to make this as interactive as folks want it to be. I know sometimes it's you want to kind of just absorb the information, but please do not hesitate to jump in with questions. I'll try and kind of keep an eye out for questions, and I think some of our other hosts here will help with that. And then I'll definitely be keeping an eye on the chat as well. So so please feel free to drop any questions you may have or comments or feedback that you have along the way. So in terms of what I'm going to talk about today more specifically, I'm going to start with kind of going over just whenever I'm talking about teams and multi-team systems, what am I talking about? What do I mean? What are some of the kind of jumping a little bit into some of the challenges and advantages of working these bigger kind of teams of teams. And then wrapping it up a little bit with some recommendations. Like I said, this is a relatively still kind of newish area of research and work, but we have been able to find some things that seem to be important, some things that seem to be useful and beneficial. So, so I'm going to be able, hopefully, be able to tell you a little bit about those things today, and then hopefully, if we are good on time, we'll have a few minutes here at the end to also address any other questions and things at the end. But as I said, please don't hesitate to pop them in the comments or in the chat, or just speak up, since we've got a nice kind of smaller group today. All right. So, and actually, while we're on that note, it would be great for me to just kind of get a little bit of a sense of who all is here today. So I see some lovely photos here. So if you could in the chat, if you were able to just provide your name, your institution, what kind of is your area of expertise or research focus, and anything that you were potentially hoping to kind of get out of this workshop today. Any questions you might have, just to hit the ground running. I'll give folks a minute to do that if you can. Maybe, or maybe not. There we go. Great. There's Zach. Karen. All right. Well, if anyone else wants to, there you go. Joe, great. Oh, very nice. Yeah. So Dean, yep, I've been doing some work in the aerospace area myself, so hopefully this might be relevant. You might hear some useful examples here. Great, we got some health disciplines, and all right, good. So interdisciplinarity, so great mix of folks today then. So so hopefully what I'm going to talk about will apply to quite a few folks, and oh good, team building, good. All right, we've got yeah. Communication, awesome. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for doing that. And that just helps me to get a little bit of sense too, in terms of what issues or what types of these types of team, like I said, these multi-team systems, what you may be working with and dealing with. So hopefully the examples I'm going to provide are ones that might be something you can connect to a little bit here. But if anybody else hasn't had a chance yet, feel free to go ahead and drop your background info right there in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and move right ahead. There you go. So as Chris mentioned, and obviously I'm here today to talk about multi-team systems, but I think that the reason that this is an important topic, and the reason that I personally find it so fascinating, is because it's a little bit different. And working in these types of systems, what we've learned and what we continue to learn is that while there are a lot of things that we can take away from kind of the best practices of working in teams, and many of you are, I'm sure, familiar with at least the challenges and some of the opportunities for working in kind of teams where everyone's working towards the same goal and everybody kind of has the same vision, and we all kind of have a shared understanding of what it is we're supposed to be doing. All of these things can get really complex when we start to think about some of the dynamics of these bigger systems, where we're not just looking at one big team, but we're actually talking about multiple teams who have to rely on each other to get work done, to tackle major challenges and issues, and actually enough of the places where I'm, like I said, glad to see we've got some aerospace folks here today, because this may be something that that you're aware of and familiar with. Even the rocket scientists have a difficult time working these bigger systems, these bigger multiple teams that have to work together. If you were not familiar with the Mars Climate Orbiter, it's a good example of how things can go wrong whenever we've got multiple teams kind of working together towards one big overarching goal, and at the same time kind of still having to deal with their own individual goals to kind of help achieve that. So the Mars Climate Orbiter was a mishap that happened in the 90s, where the orbiter was intended to go observe the climate on Mars, to be able to provide data back for future missions, for future planning for NASA. And unfortunately, due to some challenges of working across different teams, there are lots of different, there's operations teams and development teams and project management teams. They're all supposed to be kind of working together to support this mission. It's a very costly mission, and unfortunately, because of what ended up being a relatively what we would think is a relatively minor issue, which was using different measurement systems, became the cause of the loss of the entire orbiter and millions and millions of dollars of research and work and efforts, and largely due to the different teams not communicating the right information to the right people at the right time. And so, this was a lot of problems, a lot of issues, a lot of challenges that really came up here for various reasons, and probably ones that will all sound very familiar to you all. So, whenever you've got these different types of teams working together, even though we kind of are all thinking we've got maybe the same general idea of what we're supposed to be doing, the challenges come in whenever we have to kind of do some more of the day-to-day and more of these kind of sub goals that we have to manage along the way to reach that bigger, higher order goal in the end. So unfortunately, we've seen some failures here, but we've also seen some wins. So more recently, we've seen the rover go to Mars, and that be a much more successful outcome. And I kind of love this picture down here because I think it really shows kind of the camaraderie of the folks and the excitement and the getting to see that shared vision and kind of come to fruition for that case. So NASA has come a long way in terms of making improvements and kind of figuring out kind of how to work these different types of larger systems, and really thinking about not just that we've got one team, but we've got really multiple teams that may have some unique ways of working together. So so when we start to kind of move to more of this this multi-team systems perspective, it really is important because it helps us to kind of see where we're maybe having some potential for conflict, or maybe some competing goals, some competing issues, needs, resources that maybe potentially interfering with our ability to kind of work towards this bigger overarching goal and kind of get some of the day-to-day things done, especially in particular. And unfortunately, even though this may be and sometimes we really can get a lot accomplished with these big systems, sometimes we can't. But really, in order to kind of the future of a lot of our large grant funding agencies and agencies that are providing research dollars, they really want us to be working, especially kind of thinking in these interdisciplinary mindsets and approaching our work not just, again, as kind of one big giant team that's working together, but really different teams from different specialties, different areas and disciplines, different types of expertise that must come together, because it's more than just the capability of kind of one giant team. It's really that we need to kind of pull from these different disciplines and kind of have them each work on their own goals that are, so that will contribute to the bigger longer term goals. So think about like grand challenges and things like that. So a lot of the directions that NSF is going right now, those are kind of big societal challenges and issues, and NIH as well, that we can't overcome with just kind of sticking to one large team of researchers. We really need to kind of think about how to better leverage all of our strengths and expertise and kind of more of this multi-team system structure. So I've now been talking a whole lot and saying the word multi-team system over and over again. But I want to kind of take a step back here for just a minute to just really define what I'm talking about when I'm describing these multi-team systems, and what do they look like. And probably as we start talking about this, many of you may really start to realize, okay, well, actually, I'm part of not just a team, but a multi-team system. So when we think about multi-team systems, these are interdependent groups of 2 or more distinct component teams that that have to work together towards this shared higher order goal. So something like trying to, as you can see from the earlier example, trying to send a rover to Mars, send an orbiter to Mars, things like that. That takes a lot of folks kind of working in these different teams, relying on one another to get this big goal accomplished. So if we think about things like coming up with vaccines, coming up with solutions to world hunger and curing cancer and other diseases and things like that, then we really kind of need these different teams of experts coming together to work towards these big goals, where they're going to have kind of smaller goals along the way. And what I mean by that is that an MTS, really one of the key defining features of these multi-team systems, is that there is a goal hierarchy. So we have some kind of big picture goal that we're working towards. And in order to achieve those goals, we have to have some kind of more team level goals where where individuals are all kind of working together interdependently within those teams, but then also working across those boundaries and working across with the other teams to get something accomplished. So an example that I'm in right now is that we're doing some research and work with emergency medicine physicians, and we've been doing this since the start of COVID, and we've been trying to reduce track and monitor and address hopefully burnout and well-being and stress within the emergency medicine community in terms of the healthcare workers. So that requires not just us as IO psychologists, so as organizational researchers coming in and kind of saying, oh yes, we can come in and figure out exactly what's going on, and our team can just tell you what you need to do. We really have to work very closely with physician leadership. We have to work very closely with nursing leadership and other specialty areas, like disciplines that make up this emergency medicine department. We also have to have experts on burnout and well-being and experts on leadership and team dynamics and things like that. So we're all kind of contributing in this bigger structure, this big problem of how do we address burnout in healthcare workers by bringing together these different areas of expertise, these different teams that can each kind of contribute to one piece of the puzzle and help us hopefully address that problem more holistically and at a level that none of us could do by ourselves. All right, so when we think about working in these types of systems, there's definitely some advantages. We're gonna not just jump into these and not have a reason for using them. Especially, we want to make sure that this is actually necessary above and beyond what just a team might look like. And one major aspect, one major benefit here is that this kind of component team structure of multiple teams working together towards this bigger picture is that these teams can really specialize in what they're good at. And it allows for teams to make unique contributions to really kind of help the system divide and conquer in terms of the tasks and how work is going to get done. There's two examples here that kind of similar to the NASA example I was already discussing earlier, but also for this is an example from oncology in terms of what a patient who is receiving cancer treatment, they may have multiple care teams that are supporting their treatment and are kind of working towards making sure that they're receiving the right care and the best possible care that they can get for their hoped and just kind of desired outcomes. So and what might be possible for them. So they may have a primary care team. They may also have an oncology team. And in some cases, they may have a palliative care team that is kind of really providing ongoing support from a variety of ways. So each of these teams is really kind of providing care and support, and they must work together though to really make sure that there is that the patient's quality of life and that their desires and needs and wishes are being supported along the way. So, and sometimes there may be some differences in those opinions and perspectives, but each group can really kind of bring in their specialization and really help to focus on kind of different needs for this patient's longer term goals. Another component here, and that kind of goes along with the specialization aspect, is that this multi-team system structure allows us to bring in new and different resources. So if we were to think about from a research team perspective, let's say we're going after a big research grant where we need different teams or different universities to be involved. Each of those teams is going to also be able to bring in their own resources. There may be different study populations that they can access. There may be different internal resources or support mechanisms through their universities, through their organizations that will help to kind of contribute to this overall system success. And there may be some teams that maybe if they have fewer resources available, that can kind of really help to be balanced by some of the teams that may have a little bit more to bring in. So if we don't have everything we need, we can get some support, get some reliance from some of our other teams who are available there as well. So especially being able to get diverse resources and access is an important component here as well. A third advantage of working in these multi-team system structures is that they allow for increased flexibility. So whenever we're talking about, again, kind of these grand challenges and these big issues that may come up, there may be different teams that are needed kind of at different points in time. So we may have a research team that may be trying to deal with some agriculture, future or current issues going on in agriculture, so maybe droughts or other crop failures or things like that, where they may be trying to come up with new ways to in the future kind of support and kind of maybe improve processes, improve growing, things like that, they also need the support of other disciplines to kind of make that happen. But at various points in time, we may have kind of different, because our goals may, what we're working on right now might look a little different in a few months from now, a few years from now, even a few days from now. So we're able to kind of use this multi-team systems instead of having to go out and get brand new people to pull into our big team. We can say, okay, well, we've already kind of got these areas of expertise, and depending on what our current goals are, we can connect more or less with different teams. We can rely more, maybe complete more work, do more kind of back and forth, and getting support from multiple teams at one time, and not just from one person who has that expertise, but multiple people who have that expertise on that team. So that can also be a huge benefit as well, is that you're not just relying on the one civil engineer. You're relying on you've got the resources of multiple people who have that area of expertise, that discipline, and have that knowledge that they can bring in to support you. So it can help with kind of as things change, as our project needs change, as our work research changes, we can adjust a little bit more easily when we have these multi-team systems structures in place. Now, of course, I've told you all good things, but we've got to always have to get into some of the more challenging aspects. I wouldn't be here if it was only all good things, I think. We also really have to understand and be aware of some of the challenges in order to then know kind of how do we make the most of our work in these multi-team system structures, and maybe what are some things that could be done, ways that you can improve kind of your work together. So we'll get there in a few minutes, but first, let me tell you a little bit about the challenges that we've seen. We've gone through and kind of did a review a few years ago, trying to identify what were some of the major, both these advantages, but also some of these more challenging issues that come up across contexts, across different types of systems. What are some of the potentially key issues that really kind of stand out? And the first one of these is that when you're talking about having to, I said that a great thing is that we're able to kind of bring together these different people from different backgrounds and different areas of expertise. But as you can imagine, the more people you add, the more complex your dynamics become, the more challenging sometimes things may get. This is something that I think led to the problematic issues. That Mars Climate Orbiter example is that the right people were not connecting and sharing the right information across teams at the right time. So there was kind of too little direct coordination going on, for example, between frontline folks and higher up leaders. And because of that, then whenever problems were brought up, they weren't necessarily brought up to the right people. So this could have been something that could have been fixed well before the orbiter was lost, but unfortunately, because the coordination wasn't happening at the right level, then that that information exchange didn't happen. So there was insufficient collaboration in that scenario. Now, a lot of times, and what we might see is that the some systems may try to overcompensate. So, so especially maybe if they've dealt with this issue before, then it's okay. Well, if we weren't coordinating enough before, let's over coordinate and let's share as much information with everyone as we possibly can. And when you start to see this type of, everyone's talking to everyone and trying to get information from everyone else, it's just really inefficient. So it's that, we're really kind of wasting our time and our resources and our energies and really just exhausting ourselves trying to over communicate and talk really kind of too much. We might get mixed messages. So it's really not efficient there either. So there's usually a sweet spot. I'll talk about that, some ways to kind of start to recognize that. But it can be difficult and it can take some time to kind of get to that point. All right. Another challenge we see is that, as I said, the great thing about these types of systems is that we're bringing together lots of different teams that have unique knowledge, unique expertise, unique experiences. But the problem there is that we're also bringing together a lot of people who have a lot of differences in their across their teams. Kind of when you look between the teams, there may be different ways that we typically work together whenever we're working across disciplines, as I'm sure that everyone here is probably well aware of. You have to spend some time really trying to understand some of the language, some of the ways, kind of getting that shared understanding, shared ideas, shared mental model of, are we even talking about the same thing, or what, are we defining our goals the same way? Are we talking about, the same question or issue or problem? And so we kind of sometimes maybe have different disparities in our information, who has what, who knows what. Sometimes we don't always know in these systems because there are multiple teams, and it's not just knowing one person that you've got to go ask questions of or know what they're supposed to be doing. It's that you need to know what that whole other team is doing. So what are those folks at Clemson working on? What are those folks at Georgia Tech working on? We've got to figure out kind of ways to improve that and kind of address those maybe differences in how we're working together, and also kind of help to clarify, sometimes even making sure that everybody has the same understanding of our goal. So this can be a challenge whenever, if I kind of going back to that the example I mentioned before with the cancer patient who has both a palliative care team and an oncologist team that is working and supporting them. There may be differences in kind of how what the oncology team wants to would recommend for the patient, and what the course of action, the treatments that they may want and be encouraging the patient to pursue maybe not always in line with the patient's wishes, maybe the patient's kind of quality of life that they desire to have. And so that can be a place where sometimes then we may see some challenges and some differing opinions and differing perspectives that may take a little while to come out and may be very difficult to resolve. So kind of going along with this and kind of digging a little bit more into that, we actually used this in a paper of ours that we did a few years ago, kind of using this example of the cancer care multi-team system, where if our overall goal is this optimal care outcome for the patient, well, what is optimal care? That may look very different, and we may have different the challenge here is the mixed motives aspect, but that's not to say that that folks have bad motives or they've got underlying hidden agendas or issues or things. It just means that there just may be different perspectives, different ways that, different things that we see as being important at this point in time, differences in terms of what, what optimal care looks like in the patient example. And depending on the stage and the severity and the side effects of the treatment options, different patients may have different perspectives on what that optimal care is going to look like. So as a system, these teams have to kind of figure out, okay, well, what are our, are we kind of all viewing this big goal the same way, the superordinate goal kind of the same way, and what are we doing in our teams? Is the care that we're providing, is the work that we're doing with this patient in line with that, that optimal care goal that we all have in mind now. So sometimes this can create problems because it can create competitions or I said just kind of different ways that people may approach this. Some may not even realize that there's a disconnect between how I'm viewing this big picture goal. What I see as optimal care may just be, I may just assume that we all see that the same way, and I may not understand, or our team may not see kind of that those discrepancies until maybe very late in the game. So of course this is something that we see in individuals and teams, but the problem here is that it just becomes that much more exacerbated because you've got more perspectives, more opinions, more kind of complexities that we have to deal with. So it's just a very prevalent issue that we have to think about, and it doesn't mean that that we're necessarily wrong, or that somebody is has a wrong opinion or a wrong motive or a wrong perspective. It's just that there may be differences in what's important, what's what is necessary, what's needed, and these are things that it just gets a little bit more complex to try and define and operationalize at the system level as opposed to the team level. And so I'd encourage you all to, this is something where, where if you have worked in these types of systems before, I'm not gonna have us do this today, but think a little about if you've ever been in this type of multi-team system, then did you experience these kind of mixed motive issues, and did they result in any kind of conflicts? And maybe think a little about if you also just had conflicts on these types of teams, do you think that maybe the motive issue was maybe something that was driving that? So something to think about. I think we've probably all been on these types of in these types of situations before, but sometimes it can be a little bit harder to recognize when you're in the middle of it all. All right, our last challenge that we see with these types of multi-team systems is that they tend to be put together. Again, they're groups of teams of experts that are coming together to kind of work towards these big, huge, challenging goals and issues. And while while we need these types of teams for this, or these types of multi-system structures to kind of really tackle these big challenges, because they're challenging and maybe very unknown and very different than what we are expecting, and we may not have a great answer to what our system is trying to how we're going to get our work done, or how we're going to achieve the goals that we're going to get that we have set before us. And we get into especially more kind of dynamic, rapidly changing, rapidly adapting environments. We tend to look when we're in these kind of really messy time periods, it's a lot easier to say, oh, well, I know the people on my team, and I know what they expect. I know what they, they're maybe more similar to me than these other teams that we're working with, and these other people that I have to work with. And so if everything else is kind of chaotic, then I'm going to look to those who I feel most comfortable with. And more often than not, it's going to mean looking kind of to the team that I'm already part of in this bigger system, and maybe not always going out and seeking support or communicating or coordinating with those other teams as well as I could do if I was maybe in a more kind of everything's stable and easy, and I can maybe take a few more risks, or maybe it's a little bit more safe to reach outside of my comfort zone. So when we're in these more dynamic, kind of rapidly evolving and changing situations, or just really complex, complicated situations, it's a lot easier to go back to those, the folks we know, as opposed to and the ones that may understand what we're dealing with more on a regular basis. And this can be just something that we have to think about. And especially, again, we're putting these teams together to work together because they are going to be able to achieve these great things. But you really have to make sure they're actually working together in order to make use of any of this time and effort and these resources that we're putting in. So what do we do? How are we going to deal with all these issues? What have we learned, especially over the past, couple decades where we've been looking at these types of systems? Well, we've got a few recommendations. Actually, there's a paper I did a couple years back that that really kind of tried to break this down a little bit more and dig into, as I said, kind of what are some of the big challenges and issues, and what do these look like? What kind of some key lessons that that we can take away? And one of the big things that we really are, that we pull out of this is that the biggest challenge is trying to balance, what we're doing as a component team of this bigger system, as well as kind of always keeping in mind our bigger, what's our main goal, what's our main priority, what's our main, what is our system trying to achieve? So, and that can be really hard because we're trying to, sometimes kind of balance these competing needs, competing issues, and what I'm doing right now to achieve my, what my team needs me to do right now. Depending on how I approach that, it may, end up really helping our overall goal, or it may conflict with some of the other teams and what they're doing, and we have to kind of figure that out if we want to get to that bigger goal in the end. Of course, we're in these complex task environments. As I said, bringing these groups together is important because we need that knowledge, we need that expertise to come together, but it also can make it that much harder to actually kind of collaborate because we've got a lot of differences to overcome along the way. So what do we look for? We look for interventions. What are things that we can do to kind of jump in and maybe start to improve the performance, or especially really even just start, if we know that we're going to work in these types of systems, how do we just really set off on the right foot, even from the very beginning, or as soon as we start to recognize that that we're in this type of system, because sometimes it may take a little while before you even realize, oh wait, we're not just one team, we're really multiple teams kind of working together, and we need to maybe do a little bit more legwork to understand the dynamics of what this is going to look like. So first thing that I think is extremely important to do is like I said, really understand what it is that what have you gotten yourselves into? What is the who all is involved? Are we starting to realize that, like I said, we've got this type of structure? If you're not sure if you're in a multi-team system, I would suggest, starting with mapping out, okay, well, who's on my team, who else working together, and what's our goal? Are there other teams that are contributing kind of to that big picture goal? And how do we coordinate? How do we work with each other? Are there some of our teams that, maybe need to work together a whole lot and really need to rely on each other very on a regular basis, on a daily basis? Do we have other teams that are have to maybe share some information or give each other some input here and there, but maybe a little less reliant on achieving goals based on kind of their communicating and coordinating? So I would highly recommend that everyone can really focus on and really start with what is our structure look like. Kind of do what we call kind of a task analysis of who are our members, who are our component teams, what are our goals, what are our priorities, what are kind of those more proximal, so what we're doing right now, what are those big picture goals that we're trying to achieve, who on what team needs to be kind of interacting with one another, are those going to change over time? Can we anticipate now any changes? And then especially thinking about what is it that maybe what is our needed pattern of collaboration, what should we be doing, and then what are we actually doing? Because that's what we may see in these types of systems more often than not is that, let's say maybe we need to have more of that structure up top. That over there on the right hand side, that top figure is maybe what we should be aiming for and shooting for in order to achieve our goals. But what we actually have is the bottom one, where maybe the leadership team is kind of relaying information to different teams, and then some of those teams are getting that message. Some of them are having to kind of play telephone to coordinate and get things done, and it can be a little bit challenging. So, and some teams that need to be coordinating maybe aren't doing that at all. So because maybe they're expecting that leaders are going to do it, or something like that. So understanding what, not just what our interactions and who's on your team to start with, but also kind of, are we there yet in terms of understanding who needs to be talking to whom at what point in time. One way to do this, and so you may already be doing this for your teams, is that really think about, if you were putting charters together, so kind of these documents to lay out and say, okay, who it is that is on our team, who all is working together. We kind of do these a lot just with teams, but they also are great, especially for these types of bigger multi-team system structures, because that's where you can really sit down and say, okay, how are we going to work together? And especially if we have been working together and we're realizing we've got this more complex structure that we can set up and lay out, what are our goals, what are our rules, what are our objectives, how do we tend to work together, what are our norms, that kind of thing, is really a key step no matter what point you're in. Of course, the earlier the better, but these will help with your especially clarifying a lot of issues and hopefully avoiding problems in the future. And even sometimes if we have teams that are there are systems that, as I said, maybe they don't start off as strongly, but have some good charters in place that can really help make sure that the right people talk and the right communication ends up happening, so that the work gets done effectively. So other ways that other areas for improvement and things that we can do for these types of systems is to really get not just, I'm sure many of you might be familiar with programs like Team Steps and other team training programs, which are fantastic for kind of getting teams to understand some of the challenges and the issues that they may face from a team's perspective, but also thinking about these the unique components of working in these bigger teams of teams, especially the between and across team communication that needs to happen. This is one area that is really important to start thinking about, even just getting folks a clear understanding of what are all the different teams that are in the system, and who do I need to work with, and what is it they do, what is what do their day-to-day tasks look like, what information are they relying on me for and my team on, so that we can make sure that we're setting this up in a way that's going to be useful. And these types of things are going to help with understanding and hopefully help to create more channels and opportunities for the different teams to not just focus on, yep, we got a great team here in terms of our component teams in the system. We're all individually doing the things we need to do, but we're not talking enough to each other. We're not coordinating, communicating enough across these boundaries. So the team training can be great for making our teams work well, but we also have to think about, okay, how are we going to get folks more aware that, hey, we're part of this bigger system, and there may be some understanding I need to have what each team is doing, and what they may be expecting of me, or what I may need to be expecting of them. And really one of the biggest issues here, you'll see, got a couple slides on this one, is that it really, successful multi-team systems are those that understand that, yes, we are different teams, but we have to rely on each other, and that we need to have kind of different opportunities to interact and connect. We really have to take the time to work across the boundaries, to kind of understand a little bit more about where everybody's coming from, what it is that, why might I be so adamant that I want to get something done a certain way? Well, there may be some underlying, needs or requirements or things like that, that the more that we can have, even if it's just more informal conversations, interactions, if, for research teams, this may mean having opportunities for for everyone, not just PIs and co-PIs and folks to get together, but also giving grad students and postdocs and other researchers on the teams the opportunity to get to understand a little bit more about what they're each doing, what they're contributing to the bigger project. That kind of thing can be really beneficial. And in kind of carrying this forward, continuing to kind of focus on working across those boundaries. Also thinking about if we're starting to run into issues or challenges of well, I see things this way and you see things that way, and we're never going to come up to an agreement. We have to sometimes take a step back and say, okay, well, what are we trying to do? What's our bigger picture? What's our distal goal that we're all here working towards? Helping this patient, so or solving this this key issue for NASA, eventually getting folks, getting people to Mars. And if that's our, if our, big picture goal is that we're trying to achieve something kind of big like that, let's take a step back and say, okay, well, what, how is our, how are our differences right now, maybe impacting, or how we're, how is it that we're prioritizing our goals that are happening today and the things that we're doing next week, tomorrow, next year. Are those things getting us towards those bigger picture goals, or do we maybe need to think about and reorganize and adjust what we're doing, or maybe even just take a step back and say, oh well, I guess I don't really need to have this happen right this minute, because something else is a bigger priority or a bigger need or a bigger issue for another team, and so let me help support them and work with them, and then we'll get there. We'll get to what my issue is or what I'm trying to achieve, to contribute to our bigger picture goal, but it may need to wait a few days, a few weeks, that kind of thing. So or I may have to help this as a team first. And then also, again, making sure that there is a clear understanding of what each team is contributing to the system, not just essentially saying, oh, we all have to view everything the same way, because we're not going to. That's just going to be, again, the nice, really beautiful component of bringing multi systems together is that we get to utilize all these different perspectives and expertise and knowledge and information, and we want to make sure that we understand and that yes, we are going to have those different views and perspectives, and that's going to be a great thing because it's going to help us tackle problems in different ways. And if we all try to make it where we're all viewing everything the exact same way all the time, we've got a shared identity across this whole system. It's just not going to be realistic. So it's more about understanding what is it that we're each contributing, where we have similarities, maybe where we have more unique differences that we may need to even spend a little more time addressing. Again, the more we can kind of be open and discuss these differences and issues, the easier it's going to be to help tackle these bigger problems. This is just one way to think about this too, is that maybe one way to understand and have a we all have to deal with meetings. We all have to be in group meetings, team meetings all the time. MTSs are no different, and so we have to think about what maybe what might be our preferences for if we're just having our team meeting without the bigger group, then how are we running that? What are our tendencies, our preferences for doing that, versus maybe some of the other teams that may have maybe part of this big system, and how are we going to then translate that to what our big picture goals are? I've done a lot of work with folks in healthcare, and it's really nice to work with them. I've learned some really great tips and processes that they use for managing meetings. I'm not always as much of a fan of having meetings at like 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning, but I also understand that that's whenever physicians can meet or when nurse managers can meet, and so we work with those, and and we are flexible on some things, and we make sure that we've got kind of a shared understanding of what our system level goals and how our meetings maybe need to happen in order to help those run smoothly and help us get to those bigger picture things in the end. So so even just something as simple as how are we going to run our meetings whenever we're all coming together is something to think about. And then another component here to get my recommendations there a little bit out of order, but something else to think about is a little bit more towards the leadership aspect. So when we think about, again, these big, I haven't really focused on it too much. You may have heard some more about leadership in some of the earlier sessions, but we all know how important that the leaders are for a team, and it's that much more important whenever we're talking about these bigger systems where we may have not just one leader but multiple leaders who are having to kind of coordinate. So if you think about PI, co-PI kind of structure, that's really what you're talking about. You've got multiple teams that each of the co-PIs may be leading, and they may have have to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to make sure that everybody is heard, and the especially in these big systems where there's a lot of folks, a lot of perspectives, leaders can be especially important in terms of helping kind of manage the relationships and make sure that that folks feel comfortable speaking up, that that they feel able to contribute to discussions, so that every grad students and feel comfortable speaking up and sharing their thoughts and perspectives and opinions, and really leaders can be a model for that, and unfortunately can also be a model against it if we're not careful. So something to, again, to be very, very aware of, and especially kind of focus on from a leadership perspective, and also kind of how are those leaders going to work together to make sure that these things are happening across the whole system. So for that, let's take a time here. I'm gonna skip through this a little bit. Another component is to kind of keep track of both what's going on with the system and the team at the same time. There's some tools and resources that are out there to kind of help with this a little bit. And also something that we have been kind of looking into and trying to do a little bit more work around is to think about, we hear a lot about debriefs that happen at the team level. So teams that kind of, after you've worked together, you may come together and say, oh, how did that go? What were the things we did well? What were the things that we could have improved on? We also need to think about that at these bigger system levels. So I do work with, for example, disaster response groups. And so maybe after they've done a exercise or a drill, they may go through and do a kind of individual, each team. So the firefighter team and the EMS team and the police and everybody may kind of have their own individual debriefs after a big simulation disaster response drill. But they also need to come together and say, okay, well, what was it that we did really well together as a system, and maybe where were there areas for improvement? We've been involved in some of these where they actually learned that there were different communication channels, literal communication channels, that in a real situation would have led to a lot of coordination problems, and so they were able to kind of fix that by doing more of this debrief at the system level. And especially too, is another component here is to think about kind of how do we bring all this together and make sure that we're achieving, as we've got a lot of goals, and especially when we get to these big picture, big challenges, it could be easy to kind of maybe lose sight of those bigger goals that we're trying to achieve, or we may always feel like, well, we're never, we haven't gotten there yet to the big goal, so we're not done. We haven't been successful yet because we haven't gotten to the big goal yet. But we have to kind of step back and say, okay, well, we have achieved things, we have done things, and let's make sure that we're rewarding these things, that we're incentivizing all of our, so we're achieving our proximal goals that are helping us get to that big goal, that big big challenge in the end. Something that, for example, that we have to we may see a lot in scientific, so research MTSs, is that there are different preferences and procedures and approaches to publications, and so what is success going to look like? How are we going to reward contributions from a publication perspective? If maybe some of the disciplines involved just want to publish and get the papers out, Whereas other folks are only going to be rewarded if they're publishing in a certain journal with a certain level of authorship or that kind of thing. So so how do we kind of make sure that we're, especially in these bigger, more complex MTS structures, making sure that we're rewarding the members as they're getting the work done along the way, and especially at those more kind of proximal goal level. So we're not just going to save it all up to the very end and publish it all then. All right. And just kind of one last thought that I want to share is just like with teams, one intervention is not necessarily going to be the solution to a good charter is really important for your system, but it's not going to be the end all be all in terms of having your system be successful. You're going to need to have you may need to have multiple interventions along the way. You may have different teams that may need interventions. So this is an example, kind of going back to that, like I talked about earlier, the burnout and stress research that we've been doing, and trying to look at that. We've got a psychology team, an emergency medicine team, and members, researchers from public health who are kind of looking at some of the bigger, more national level issues and impacts on healthcare workers, and then what impact that has on patients. And so in order for us to be effective, there may be things that we're having to kind of help support each of our teams, but then also as a system, doing some interventions and taking some steps and doing debriefs and things like that along the way to make sure that we're all working to the best of our abilities, and that we're also kind of coordinating and doing the things well that that we need to be doing to get to those end goals of our grand goal of trying to reduce burnout and stress and improve turnover rates and things like that, and reduce things like healthcare worker suicide rates and mental illness and that kind of thing. So big goals that take a lot of work and take a lot of kind of interdependent work from these different teams to be able to get to them in the future. So we may need lots of interventions. We need lots of help ourselves to be able to get tackle an issue like that. So and sometimes it's not most complex and challenging, and not everything just because we're in a complex system doesn't mean we always have the most complex solution. This is just a quick example here of scrub caps. I found this to be just kind of a really cool example of how in a multi system of a surgery that one of the biggest challenges is trying to keep track of who's doing what and kind of who even is what in what role, and because everybody's got same attire on, and you've got your cap on and everything, and it can be hard to tell people apart. And so in this case, just putting names and roles on the caps can really help with some of that coordination. So not a super costly, challenging, difficult thing to implement, but a really important one. So so that is all I have. I think we've only got like 1 minute left. My apologies for a little bit long there. As you can tell, I enjoy talking about this, but happy to answer any questions anyone may have. And thank you all very much for your time today.
Thanks, Marissa. Before everyone jumps off, because we are at time, be sure to fill out the survey that we sent out. We're trying something new this year. We'll have potential consulting sessions with Marissa that you can set up if you have any particular issues that you want to talk with her about. It's about an hour-long session where you'll just have one-on-one or your teams on one time with Marissa. But also give your feedback on the session overall. We're happy to hear it. And on that note, I think we can close it out if there aren't any pressing questions.
This was a great talk. I did have one quick question, if that's okay. I know we're at time. Question was about, do you have any recommendations for metrics to use when evaluating the effectiveness of a multi-system team? And I think like the average, the initial thing would be just like, what is the goal, and seeing if that is an objective. But I find sometimes that certain parts of the system are carrying the other parts of the team members. So kind of, and then you might hear, part of the team members will say, oh yeah, this is going great, but the other ones may not feel like they're really contributing. So just kind of curious as to if you had any other like objective metrics.
Yeah, And sometimes it's, there's a couple different ways to do it. I think you hit on, one is just to kind of understand the workflow. And then I think especially, by laying out sometimes too, the interdependencies, then you can start to see where there might be goals kind of piling up, or, tasks or work that may be piling up for one team, that maybe slowed down or impeded by the lack of work or work by other teams. And also there's sometimes also just asking, kind of getting at, even using more kind of standard measures that we use for things like psychological safety at a team level, taking that and asking, not just, okay, first off, yes, respond to that, thinking about the team that you work with as part of the system, but then also asking, okay, how do you feel about, do you feel psychologically safe in this bigger, system? So yes, I might be able to talk with all my colleagues at Clemson, and we're able to we're all on the same page, and we feel comfortable talking and speaking up and sharing ideas with one another. But when it comes to our big quarterly PI meetings or something like that, then there's maybe more concerns or more issues or things like that, or less psych safety. So I think sometimes it's even just taking taking the measures that are at the team level, standard metrics from the team perspective, and just also adding that system level as well. Hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we'll end. Thank you all for attending. And this is our last of the year, so we